Block just laid off almost half its workforce and, of course, blamed AI. They're full of crap. Let's talk about it. So welcome to Dave is Not AI. I'm Dave Linthicum, an AI SME and an AI skeptic, looking at AI with a balanced perspective. Let's get started. So this, according to CNN, and I'll go ahead and put the article in the description as well as up on the screen right now. Block, the company behind Square, Cash App, and Afterpay, is cutting its staff by 40%. The reason? Intelligence tools, aka AI, according to a letter to shareholders by co-founder Jack Dorsey. And every time I look at a picture of Jack Dorsey, he kind of looks more like Rasputin, but I digress. So the reason I'm covering this is you guys sent me a bunch of emails asking me to. In other words, what was my opinion on this? And so rather than just responding to all of the emails or putting out a post on LinkedIn, I figured I'd work up a video. So the Block layoff story is being packaged as AI efficiency, but that framing conveniently turns a management capacity mistake into an inevitability of technology. This is the same old story we saw with a bunch of companies in the last year or two. In other words, they're laying people off and they're talking about AI efficiencies as the reason they're doing so, because that gives them a free pass. In other words, they're not laying people off because they made a mistake in the past. In other words, overhiring, which is the case here. But they're saying, well, this new technology came along. We didn't see it coming. And suddenly we have these efficiencies. And we have a fiduciary responsibility to operate this company as efficient as possible, to live up to our shareholder equity. And that's why companies exist. So they lay people off. But the reality behind this is that they overhired in the past, probably overhired during COVID. And I think they so much admitted that. And this was a convenient way to normalize their existing workforce because they didn't need them anymore. So in other words, I'm sure there were efficiencies, AI or otherwise, that were getting into the business, but you cut over a long period of time. You don't just lay off half your workforce. So that's something that's a bit more drastic, and it's a bit more grounded in the fact they made management mistakes. They overhired, and this is them fixing that mistake. That's all this is. It probably has little or nothing to do with AI, and I wish people would stop lying about this stuff. So when a company cuts thousands because of AI, it's often a shorthand for we hired ahead of demand and now we're resetting the headcount to match reality. And that's the case here. In the case of Amazon, we just went through the layoffs there, and Microsoft and Salesforce, and the list goes on. Small and big companies out there are really kind of pulling this little trick. The reality is they made a mistake. They overhired. They don't need as many people anymore. It may be better for them in terms of efficiency to, start weeding out the dead wood, and they're able to do so by, under the guise of layoffs, and they're able to avoid, employee lawsuits and things like that by doing that. And they're just pulling that here. And it's a disingenuous act, in my opinion. I think I would have a lot more respect for Jack and it's not only him, it's the other CEOs that have pulled this stuff as well, to come out and say, hey, listen, look, we overhired, during COVID, and we weren't able to normalize the workforce in the last few years. And so we're going to do some layoffs to bring more efficiency back into the business. And while AI is driving some efficiency, it's not necessarily the reason that we're doing it. And that would be the truth. I would have a lot more respect for them if they did that. So the cleanest explanation for this is pandemic era over expansion. The org got too big, too layered, and too expensive. And this is a straightforward cost normalization process. And that's what this is. And there's no reason why you need to paint it any other way. And so at the end of the day, I think this is about being honest to the employees and honest to the shareholders and honest to the customers about what's really going on. This AI mirage stuff is just getting a little old. In other words, people who know anything about AI can see right through it. If you are going to cut some of these jobs over to, for example, AI agents, they keep pulling that one as well, it's going to take a long transition over time, and it's going to require those employees being around for those transitions. So if you're just reducing the workforce, you can certainly do that through layoffs. But if it's a transition into AI, it's going to be a more methodical cutover that's going to take several months, if not several years, to get it done right. And so no one's moving in that direction. It's a big fat excuse. So again, AI didn't create an excess payroll line item, overhiring did. AI just makes the timing and messaging of the correction easier to justify. And we're going to see that, across companies right now. And I suspect others are going to pull this over the next, for the remainder of 2026. We're going to see layoffs. And hey, man, AI it's just able to do some amazing stuff right now. We're able to take the business to the next level, and we're going to get rid of half our employees to do that. Not necessarily going to be the case. And if they were implementing AI in some sort of a reasonable way, it would take them a long period of time, and they would have a methodical plan to make that happen. Nobody has that now. They're just making the declaration that AI is valuable. Well, how is it valuable? What are you using it for? We never hear those details behind it. So we're able to treat the AI narrative as a PR wrapper, which is what it is, and the operating reality is core. Simplify teams, protect margins, and right size for sustainable growth. That's why you're doing it. And by the way, companies have the right to lay people off. I'm not pushing back on Block or any of the other companies out there, Amazon, people who made these strategic layoffs. What I am pushing back on is the lying behind it. Because you take us for idiots? I mean, I know what AI is. I know what AI can do. I know what you can achieve with AI and how you can actually remove people by replacing them with AI. And it's definitely not what you're doing largely to basically drive these layoffs. And so using it as a convenient scapegoat, I think, is disingenuous. It's not showing respect to your employees. It's not showing respect to your investors, and it's not showing respect, in my opinion, to your customers. And I think customers should start pushing back on some of this stuff. And in other words, if they're doing these disingenuous things, call them on it and see what they have to say. Go see the details behind it. I don't work at Block, so I don't know what they're doing with AI or not doing with AI. I can only make assumptions based on how I understand the technology. So if they do have something where they are replacing that many people with AI automation, show it to us. Love to see it. Now, they're not going to do that. They could probably consider it to be an intellectual property, proprietary to them, things like that. But the saying something that doesn't make any logical sense is getting a bit old. Well, anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my other videos on this channel. Also, check out my InfoWorld Cloud Computing blog, my 100+ LinkedIn learning courses, and of course, my generative AI architecture course out on Go Cloud Careers. And finally, my latest books, Unlocking the Power of Cloud and An Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing. So until next week, stay very, very safe. The magical YouTube algorithm thinks this is another one of my videos that you should watch next. Take care, guys.